Admiral Jake Morrison stood in the Great Hall of the Galactic Council on Nexus Prime. The massive chamber stretched high above him with walls made of strange blue crystal that seemed to glow from within. Around him stood beings from across the galaxy, each more alien than the last. Some looked like walking trees with silver bark. Others resembled giant insects with too many eyes. The most powerful ones were the energy beings who floated in the air like living storms. Captain Lisa Brooks stood beside Morrison. Her hand rested near her weapon, but she knew better than to draw it here. Behind them waited Dr. Sam Carter, Earth's top scientist and diplomat. All three humans looked small and weak compared to the towering aliens around them. Counselor Vexithani spoke first. Her voice sounded like breaking glass mixed with winter wind. She was one of the crystal beings who ruled the council. Her body was tall and thin, made of the same blue crystal as the walls. Light moved through her like water. The human colonies on Kepler 442b must be removed at once, she said. The Zephyrian Empire needs those worlds. Your people have had enough space for such a young race. Morrison felt his jaw tighten. 12 million humans lived on those worlds. They had been there for 3 generations. Children had been born there who had never seen Earth. Those colonists had built cities, farms, and schools. They had made those dead rocks into living worlds. Counselor Zeftar laughed. He was one of the gas beings, looking like a small storm cloud with eyes. His laughter sounded like thunder. Do not look so upset, little human. We are being kind. We could simply take the worlds and leave your people to float in space. Dr. Carter stepped forward. With respect, Counselor, these are human worlds. Our people have legal claims under galactic law. They have lived there for over 60 years. Another council member spoke up. This one looked like a giant spider made of metal. Galactic law serves the good of all species. Humans are new and do not understand the bigger picture. The Zephyrians are an old race with great power. They need room to grow. Your people can find other worlds. Morrison had heard this before. For the past 100 years, humans had been giving ground to older races. Every time the council wanted something, they took it from the humans. Every trade deal favored the aliens. Every dispute was settled against human interests. The council treated humans like children who did not know better. Furthermore, Vexthani continued, Earth will reduce its military ships by 60%. Your species builds too many weapons. This makes other races nervous. Captain Brooks made a small sound of anger. She had served in the human fleet for 20 years. She knew how small it really was compared to other races. The council was asking them to cut what little defense they had. You must also accept new trade rules, added another counselor. This one looked like a walking plant with purple leaves. Human goods will have higher taxes. Your ships will be searched more often. We must make sure you are not hiding anything dangerous. The insults kept coming. The council spoke about humans like they were talking about animals that needed to be controlled. They made it clear that humanity existed only because the council allowed it. Every human achievement was dismissed. Every human right was seen as a gift that could be taken away. Morrison thought about his daughter back on Earth. She was 10 years old and wanted to be an explorer like her father. What kind of galaxy was he leaving for her? One where humans would always bow down to aliens who thought they were better? Dr. Carter tried one more time. Counselors, surely we can find a middle path. Humans have always been willing to negotiate. We want peace with all races. Zeftar's storm form flashed with light. There is no negotiation. You will do as we command or face the consequences. Do not think your small fleet can protect you. We have destroyed entire civilizations for less defiance than you show now. The threat hung in the air like poison. Morrison looked at his companions. Brooks had gone very still, the way soldiers do before a fight. Carter's face had turned pale, but his eyes showed anger instead of fear. For 300 years, the Galactic Council had ruled the galaxy. They decided which races could travel the stars and which had to stay on their homeworlds. They controlled trade routes and settled all disputes. Most races accepted this because the Council was too powerful to fight. Humans had tried to fit in. They had accepted unfair deals and given up valuable resources. They had let alien ships search their vessels and arrest their citizens on weak charges. Every time humans complained, the Council reminded them how young and primitive they were. But Morrison could see something in the Council's behavior that worried him. They were getting worse. Each demand was bigger than the last. Each insult was more direct. The Council was not satisfied with controlling humans. They wanted to break them completely. You have 1 month to begin moving your colonists, Vexthani said. You have 3 months to reduce your fleet. You have 6 months to accept the new trade rules. Do not think about refusing. We know where Earth is. The council session ended with the aliens discussing other business as if the humans were no longer there. Morrison and his team were dismissed like servants who had finished their work. As they walked through the station toward their ship, none of the humans spoke. They all knew that something had changed today. The council had pushed too far. They had finally made demands that no proud species could accept. Morrison thought about the human colonies scattered across dozens of worlds. He thought about the families who would be forced from their homes. He thought about the children who would grow up knowing that humans were always second-class citizens in their own galaxy. Captain Brooks broke the silence. "Admiral, what are your orders?" Morrison looked out at the stars through a window in the station wall. Somewhere out there, humans were living their lives, working, raising families, and building a future. They deserved better than this. "Send a message to Earth," he said quietly. "Tell them the Council has made their final demand." Dr. Carter understood. "And our response?" Morrison smiled, but it was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who had tried patience and found it wanting. "Our response," he said, "will be delivered in a language the Council will understand." 3 weeks had passed since the Council gave their demands. To anyone watching, humans seemed to be following orders. Ships began leaving the Kepler colonies. Military bases went quiet. Trade vessels moved slower and carried smaller loads. The galaxy's other races nodded with satisfaction. The troublesome humans were finally learning their place. Colonel Amy Rodriguez knew the truth was very different. Deep inside the rings of Saturn, hidden among ice and rock, the real human response was taking shape. The Titan shipyards had been building ships for 50 years. Not the small patrol boats the Council knew about, but real warships disguised as mining vessels and cargo haulers. Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the UHS Retribution, watching hundreds of ships move through space. To Council sensors, these looked like evacuation transports leaving the Kepler worlds. In reality, they were moving the most valuable equipment and people back to human space. More importantly, they carried detailed maps of every Council military base and patrol route. Commander Ben Parker coordinated the hidden fleet from his command center on Luna. His screens showed the positions of over 2,000 human ships. Some were real cargo vessels doing normal business. Others were warships wearing false hulls and fake identification codes. The Council's own monitoring systems helped hide them by reporting exactly what they expected to see. Parker smiled as he watched a mining ship pass through a Council checkpoint. The alien inspectors saw rusty hull plates and worn equipment. They missed the weapon systems hidden inside fake cargo containers. They did not notice that the ship's crew were all military veterans. The Council had grown lazy after centuries of easy dominance. Director Kate Sullivan ran the largest spy network in galactic history. Her agents had been gathering information for decades. They worked as traders, diplomats, refugees, and workers. Every major Council world had humans living on it. Most aliens paid no attention to them. Humans all looked the same to Council races. Sullivan reviewed the latest reports from her people. Agent Charlie Davis on Vega Prime had mapped every defense installation on the planet. Agent Nancy Foster on the Council naval base at Rigel had stolen the patrol schedules for the entire sector. Agent Tony Clark had even managed to get a job maintaining computers at Council headquarters. The information was staggering. The Council military was huge but spread thin across thousands of worlds. They had not fought a real war in over 800 years. Most of their ships were old designs that had not been updated in centuries. Their crews were comfortable and lazy. They expected their enemies to be afraid. Dr. Alex Thompson worked in the secret research labs hidden throughout the solar system. While the Council's scientists rested on past achievements, human researchers had been pushing forward. They had developed new weapons, better shields, and faster engines. Every breakthrough was hidden from Council inspectors who never bothered to look too closely. Thompson's latest project was revolutionary. Human ships could now jump directly into a star system, instead of arriving at the edge and flying in slowly. This would let them appear right next to enemy bases with no warning. The Council had never seen anything like it because they thought such technology was impossible. Captain Rick Davis commanded one of the disguised warships. His vessel looked like a bulk cargo hauler from the outside. The hull was painted in dull colors with fake rust marks. The identification beacon broadcast shipping manifests and cargo lists. Council patrols had stopped his ship dozens of times and found nothing suspicious. What they did not know was that the cargo containers were fake. Behind thin metal walls lay gun batteries that could punch through a council cruiser. The ship's real crew stayed hidden while hired actors played the part of cargo workers. Davis was proud of how well the deception worked. The evacuation ships leaving Kepler were part of an even bigger trick. Yes, they were removing human civilians from those worlds, but they were also carrying away everything valuable. Factories were dismantled and shipped out piece by piece. Mining equipment disappeared. Even the spaceports were torn down and loaded onto transports. By the time the Zephyrians arrived to claim their new worlds, they would find empty planets with nothing but bare ground. The humans were taking everything that could be moved and destroying what could not. It was a massive middle finger to the Council disguised as compliance. Admiral Steve Collins commanded the real human fleet from his base in the asteroid belt. His ships hid among the rocks, powered down and silent. To any sensors, they looked like ordinary asteroids. Collins had been planning this moment for 20 years. Every detail had been thought through and practiced. Collins knew that when the fighting started, humans would be outnumbered 1,000 to 1. The Council had ships beyond counting and allies across the galaxy. But humans had advantages the Council did not expect. They were united in a way the Council races never were. They were angry in a way the Council had never seen. Most importantly, they were ready to fight with everything they had. Dr. Helen Foster finished the final tests on the new shield systems. Human ships would soon carry protection that could stop anything the Council threw at them. The technology was based on studying captured Council weapons for decades. Humans had learned how to turn the enemy's own power against them. Meanwhile, Captain Carl Lewis trained the Marine units that would fight on the ground. His soldiers wore armor that made them faster and stronger than any alien warrior. They carried weapons designed for close combat in cities and buildings. Every Marine had studied recordings of Council military tactics until they knew them by heart. The Council thought they knew humans. They had watched Earth for centuries and decided that humans were like other young races. Aggressive but weak, primitive but eager to please, easy to control with the right mix of threats and rewards. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Humans had spent 300 years watching and learning. They had studied every Council weakness and planned for every possible response. Most importantly, they had reached the point where they would rather die fighting than live on their knees. President Claire Watson signed the final orders from her office in Geneva. In a few hours, every human ship would receive the same message. The time for patience was over. The Council had demanded submission and would receive war instead. The trap was set. The weapons were ready. The plans were in motion. All across human space, military commanders waited for the signal that would change everything. The Council had pushed too hard and humanity's patience had finally snapped. Soon the galaxy would hear the sound it made. The attack began at exactly midnight Galactic Standard Time. Across 17 star systems, Council monitoring stations simply vanished. No distress calls, no warning signals. One moment they were there, the next they were gone. The sophisticated sensor networks that had watched over human space for centuries went dark in perfect coordination. Captain Rick Davis led the first wave aboard the UHS Vengeance. For 10 years, his ship had pretended to be a simple cargo hauler. Council inspectors had searched it dozens of times and found nothing but shipping containers and trade goods. Now the false hull plating fell away to reveal gun batteries that could match any Council warship. Davis watched his screens as the enemy base grew larger. Proxima Station was one of the Council's major military centers. Over 50,000 alien soldiers lived and worked there. The base controlled shipping lanes for 3 sectors and housed a fleet of 200 Council ships. All stations, this is Vengeance Actual. Davis spoke into his radio. Time to show them what humans do when we stop playing nice. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Proxima system. Admiral Steve Collins had timed the jump perfectly. His ships appeared in a formation that surrounded the entire system. The Council vessels at the station detected the incoming humans too, late to prepare a proper defense. The first Council ship to respond was the cruiser Eternal Glory. Its captain tried to hail the human fleet and demand they leave immediately. Instead of an answer, he received a spread of missiles that tore his ship apart in seconds. The weapons were unlike anything the Council had seen before. They punched through alien shields as if they were made of paper. Dr. Helen Foster watched from the bridge of the UHS Innovation as her new technology proved its worth. Council energy weapons hit her ship's shields and simply bounced off. The beams that should have cut through human armor like butter were turned aside by barriers that bent space itself around the ships. Foster had spent 15 years studying captured Council weapons. She learned how they worked and how to stop them. The aliens had grown comfortable with their technology and never bothered to improve it. They thought their weapons were perfect because no one had ever successfully defended against them. The Council base commander tried to organize his forces. He had trained for attacks by primitive raiders and rebel groups. He had never imagined facing an enemy with ships that could match his own. His weapons could not penetrate human shields. His shields could not stop human weapons. The battle was over before it really began. On the surface of Vega 3, Commander Carl Lewis led Marine units in an assault on the Planetary Defense Center. His soldiers wore power armor that made them move like machines and hit like hammers. Each Marine carried enough firepower to level a building. Their armor could stop anything short of a direct hit from a tank. The Council garrison was made up of Kethani warriors, a race known for their skill in ground combat. They had never lost a battle in over 300 years. They stood 7 feet tall with 4 arms and natural armor plating. Council records said they were unbeatable in close combat. Lewis proved the records wrong in less than 5 minutes. His Marines moved through the base like a storm. Kethani weapons could not penetrate human armor. Human weapons went through Kethani defenses like they were made of cloth. The alien warriors had trained to fight other aliens. They had no idea how to handle humans who fought like demons. The space battle around Proxima Station lasted 3 hours. When it ended, the debris field contained pieces of over 40 Council ships. The humans had lost only 2 vessels, and those from accidents rather than enemy fire. The station itself surrendered when human Marines began cutting through the outer hull. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. Council bases that had stood for centuries fell in minutes. Fleets that had never known defeat were destroyed before they could even return fire. The coordination was perfect. The timing was flawless. The execution was brutal. Fighter pilot Lieutenant Joe Martinez led his squadron against the Council's elite fighter wing at the Centauri base. The alien pilots were considered the best in the galaxy. They flew ships that were works of art as much as weapons. Their tactics were based on thousands of years of combat experience. Martinez and his pilots had studied recordings of every Council fighter engagement for the past 50 years. They knew exactly how the aliens would attack and how they would defend. More importantly, they knew the aliens had never faced pilots who were willing to ram enemy ships rather than retreat. The dogfight was over in 20 minutes. 30 Council fighters destroyed, 0 human losses. The alien pilots had been so shocked by human tactics that most of them forgot to fight back. They kept waiting for the humans to follow proper combat rules that humans had never agreed to follow. Dr. Nancy White's breakthrough in shield technology was proving decisive across every battle. Human ships that should have been destroyed by overwhelming firepower instead shrugged off attacks that would have vaporized whole fleets. The shields actually grew stronger when hit by multiple weapons, something the Council's computers said was impossible. The psychological effect was even more important than the tactical advantage. Council crews had been taught that their weapons were supreme. When those weapons failed to work, panic spread through alien fleets like wildfire. Captains who had never known fear suddenly found themselves facing an enemy they could not hurt. On the bridge of the UHS Defiance, Admiral Morrison watched reports come in from across the battle zone. Every target had been taken, every objective achieved. The first phase of the operation was complete with losses far below even the most optimistic projections. Morrison thought about the Council meeting 3 weeks ago. The aliens had spoken to him like he was a child who did not understand the galaxy. They had threatened his species and dismissed human achievements. They had pushed and pushed until something finally pushed back. The second phase would be harder. The Council would respond with everything they had. The real test was still coming. But for now, humans had proven something important. They had shown that the Council was not invincible. After 1,000 years of unchallenged rule, the galaxy's masters had finally met their match. Across 17 star systems, human ships broadcast the same message on all frequencies. The words were simple and direct. This is the Terran Republic. The age of Council dominance is over. Any alien vessel that approaches human space will be destroyed. Any Council base that threatens human worlds will be eliminated. We tried diplomacy. We tried negotiation. We tried patience. Now we try war. Choose your response carefully. The message reached Council headquarters on Nexus Prime 6 hours later. For the first time in galactic history, the Council chambers fell completely silent. The Council's response was swift and massive. Grand Admiral Keth Mori assembled the largest fleet in galactic history. Ships were pulled from patrol duties across 1,000 systems. Ancient vessels that had been in storage for centuries were brought back into service. The fleet that gathered at Nexus Prime contained over 2,000 warships, including 200 dreadnoughts the size of small moons. Keth Mori was a Zephyrian, one of the gas beings who considered themselves the most advanced race in the galaxy. His species had been spacefaring for over 10,000 years. They had conquered entire sectors and reduced proud civilizations to dust. He had never lost a battle in his 800 years of service. The Grand Admiral studied the reports from the human attacks with growing confusion. His analysts insisted the data was wrong. Human ships could not possibly have shields that strong. Human weapons could not penetrate Council armor that easily. Human coordination could not be that perfect. Yet the evidence was undeniable. President Claire Watson addressed the human worlds from her command bunker beneath Geneva. The massive underground complex had been built in secret over 50 years. It could survive a direct hit from the Council's most powerful weapons. Watson knew she might need that protection very soon. "My fellow humans," she began, "today we face the consequences of standing up to bullies who have grown fat on the submission of others. They come with overwhelming force, believing that fear alone will drive us back to our knees. They are about to learn that humanity has never been particularly good at staying down." The speech was broadcast across human space and beyond. Other species listened in secret, afraid to show open support but hoping desperately that the humans could succeed. For centuries, they had endured Council rule with quiet desperation. Now someone was finally fighting back. The Battle of Wolf 359 began when the Council fleet dropped out of hyperspace like an avalanche of metal and energy. Admiral Kelly Morgan commanded the human defense from the bridge of the UHS Defiance, a massive vessel that had been built in absolute secrecy over the past 20 years. It was larger than anything humanity had ever constructed and carried enough firepower to level a planet. The Council fleet spread out across the system in a formation designed to destroy entire civilizations. Each dreadnought carried weapons that could crack a moon in half. The smaller ships were armed with beam cannons that could vaporize cities. The total firepower assembled at Wolf 359 was enough to sterilize 100 worlds. Keth Mori opened communications with the human fleet. His voice carried the authority of 10,000 years of galactic dominance. "Human vessels, you will surrender immediately. Your rebellion ends here. Submit now and your deaths will be quick." Morgan's response was broadcast on all frequencies. "This is Admiral Kelly Morgan of the Terran Republic. We do not surrender. We do not submit. We do not kneel. If you want our worlds, come and take them." The Council's opening salvo should have ended the battle in seconds. 200 dreadnoughts fired simultaneously, unleashing enough energy to boil away Earth's oceans. The beams converged on the human formation with mathematical precision. Every ship should have been vaporized instantly. Instead, the human fleet emerged from the light completely undamaged. Dr. Nancy White's shield technology had created barriers that actually absorbed energy and converted it into additional protection. The more the Council fired, the stronger the human shields became. The aliens stared at their displays in shock. Their most powerful weapons had done absolutely nothing. Some Council captains fired again, thinking their systems had malfunctioned. Others simply sat frozen, unable to understand what they were seeing. Fighter pilot Lieutenant Joe Martinez led the first wave of human interceptors against the Council's fighter screens. He had studied alien tactics for years and knew exactly how they would respond. The Council fighters moved in perfect formations, following combat doctrines that were thousands of years old. Martinez and his pilots ignored every rule of space combat. They flew straight through enemy formations, firing in all directions. They used their own ships as weapons, ramming alien fighters that tried to escape. They fought like berserkers instead of soldiers, confusing and terrifying pilots who had never seen such aggressive tactics. The Council's fighter wings were elite units with centuries of experience. They had defeated rebel fleets and pirate armadas without breaking formation. But they had never faced pilots who seemed completely insane. Human fighters dove into impossible situations and somehow survived. They took damage that should have destroyed them and kept fighting. Commander Ben Parker led a squadron of human bombers against the Council dreadnought Eternal Dominion. The massive ship was over 50 miles long and protected by shields that had never been penetrated. Its armor was made from materials that could withstand the heat of a star. The ship had destroyed entire fleets single-handedly. Parker's bombers were tiny by comparison, each one smaller than the alien ship's gun turrets. But they carried weapons designed specifically for this moment. Quantum torpedoes that could phase through matter and explode inside a target. The Council had no defense against weapons that ignored their shields and armor completely. The Eternal Dominion died in a chain of internal explosions that lit up half the system. The other Council dreadnoughts watched in horror as their most powerful vessel was torn apart from within. Several alien captains tried to retreat, only to discover that human ships were faster than anything in the Council fleet. Dr. Alex Thompson monitored the battle from his laboratory on Luna. His new weapon systems were performing better than projected. Human ships were not just surviving the Council's attacks, they were winning decisively. The technological advantage that had kept the Council in power for millennia was gone. The battle raged for 18 hours across the entire Wolf 359 system. Space filled with debris from destroyed ships. Energy beams crossed the darkness like deadly lightning. Explosions bloomed and faded like deadly flowers. When the fighting finally ended, the results were clear. Over 70% of the Council fleet had been destroyed. The survivors fled toward the edge of the system, abandoning their dead and wounded. The human losses were significant but far lighter than anyone had thought possible. More importantly, they had proven that the Council could be beaten. Grand Admiral Keth Amori found himself commanding a broken fleet. His dreadnoughts were gone. His best captains were dead. His reputation was in ruins. The species that had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years had been defeated by primitives who had barely learned to travel between stars. Word of the human victory spread across the galaxy faster than the Council could suppress it. Species that had endured centuries of subjugation began to look up at the stars with new hope. The message was clear and simple. The Council was not invincible. Freedom was possible. The age of alien dominance was ending. On 1,000 worlds, beings who had forgotten what independence meant began to remember. The humans had done more than win a battle. They had shattered the myth of Council supremacy. Now other species began to wonder what they might accomplish if they stopped being afraid. The galaxy would never be the same. Humanity had lit a fire that would spread to every corner of known space. The Council had pushed too hard and awakened something they could not control. The rebellion had begun, and there would be no stopping it now. Word of the human victory at Wolf 359 spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Species that had been silent for centuries began to stir. On 1,000 worlds, beings looked up at the stars and saw possibility instead of chains. The humans had proven that the Council could bleed. Now others wanted to see how deep those wounds could go. Secretary of Defense Mike Phillips coordinated the liberation campaigns from his headquarters on Mars. His screen showed the positions of rebel fleets across 50 systems. The Cathani had risen first, their warrior culture finally given a target worthy of their rage. The plant-like Verdani followed, using their knowledge of biological warfare to devastating effect. Each species brought unique advantages to the fight. The silicon-based crystallines could survive in the vacuum of space without protection. The aquatic depths knew every ocean world in Council space. The energy beings called sparks could disable electronic systems just by touching them. United, they formed a coalition that the Council had never imagined possible. Phillips smiled as he read the latest reports. The Zephyrian homeworld was under siege by a combined fleet of 7 different species. The proud gas beings who had demanded human colonies were now begging for mercy from races they had considered inferior. The irony was not lost on anyone involved. The Council chambers on Nexus Prime were no longer scenes of calm superiority. Councillor Vexathani's crystalline form flickered with stress patterns as reports flooded in. System after system was declaring independence. Fleets were defecting to join the rebels. Even some Council species were questioning whether the old ways could continue. Emergency sessions were called every few hours as the crisis deepened. The councillors who had spoken so confidently about human weakness now argued desperately about how to respond. Some wanted to negotiate, others demanded total war. Most simply seemed confused by events that their ancient minds could not process. General Ashley Turner led the assault on the fortress world of Grimhold. The planet had been turned into a military base over 8 centuries ago. Its surface was covered with weapon platforms and shield generators. Underground bunkers housed millions of council troops. The world had never fallen to enemy attack. Turner's mixed fleet included human ships, Cathani warriors, and crystalline support vessels. The attack began with spark infiltrators disabling the planetary shields. Human bombers followed, targeting the weapon platforms with quantum torpedoes. Cathani ground forces landed while the defenders were still reeling from the orbital bombardment. The battle for Grimhold lasted 3 days. When it ended, the Council's most secure military base was in rebel hands. More importantly, the victory had been achieved by multiple species working together. The Alliance was proving that cooperation could overcome even the strongest defenses. Captain Lisa Brooks commanded a task force that liberated the slave worlds of the Outer Rim. These planets had been strip-mined for centuries to feed the Council's industrial machine. Their populations had been reduced to workers with no rights and no hope. Many species had forgotten what freedom even meant. The liberation fleets arrived to find beings who cowered at the sight of military ships. Generations of oppression had taught them that soldiers meant pain and death. It took days of gentle coaxing before the slaves understood that these ships had come to help, not harm. Brooks watched as former slaves destroyed the monitoring stations that had watched their every move. She saw beings take their first free breaths in centuries. Children who had never played ran laughing through streets that had known only work and fear. The sight reminded her why the war was worth fighting. Admiral Morrison stood once again in the council chambers, but this time the positions were reversed. The surviving counselors huddled in their floating platforms like frightened children. The beings who had ruled the galaxy for millennia now faced judgment from those they had oppressed. The chamber itself showed signs of the war. Scorch marks decorated the crystal walls where weapon fire had penetrated the defenses. Several platforms lay empty, their former occupants dead or fled. The blue glow that had once seemed eternal now flickered weakly. "The age of the Council is over," Morrison said simply. His words echoed in the vast space, carrying more weight than any council decree had ever possessed. "Your species will be allowed to return to your homeworlds and govern yourselves in peace, provided you never again attempt to subjugate others." Councillor Zeftar, his storm form barely holding together, tried one last time to assert authority. "You cannot destroy what we have built. The galaxy needs order. Without the Council, there will be chaos." Morrison shook his head. "The galaxy will have order. Just not your kind of order. We will build something new, something based on cooperation instead of domination. Every species will have a voice. Every world will choose its own path." The terms were surprisingly generous. Council species would keep their homeworlds and local systems. They would be allowed to maintain defensive fleets but could never again build conquest armadas. Most importantly, they would be forbidden from interfering with other species' internal affairs. Some counselors accepted the terms with resignation. Others raged against the new reality. A few tried to escape only to be captured by rebel fleets waiting outside the system. The mighty council that had ruled for 10,000 years dissolved in a matter of hours. President Watson signed the charter for the new Galactic Alliance in the same chamber where the council had once made their demands. Representatives from over 200 species witnessed the ceremony. The document guaranteed rights that most beings had never imagined possible: freedom of movement, freedom of trade, freedom to choose their own governments. Dr. Helen Foster was appointed as the Alliance's first science director. Her job was to share technology freely among member species. The knowledge hoarding that had kept the Council in power would be replaced by open cooperation. Every breakthrough would benefit everyone. The changes were immediate and dramatic. Trade routes that had been controlled by Council monopolies were open to all species. Worlds that had been forbidden to develop industry were given technical assistance. Races that had been kept primitive were offered education and technology. Not everything was perfect. Some species struggled with sudden freedom after centuries of control. Others used their newfound independence to settle old scores with neighbors. Pirates and warlords tried to fill the power vacuum left by the Council's collapse, but the Alliance was ready for these challenges. Mixed fleets patrolled the trade routes. Peacekeeping forces intervened in conflicts before they could spread. Most importantly, The example of cooperation between former enemies inspired others to find peaceful solutions. Commander Carl Lewis established the Alliance Military Academy on the former Council capital. Young beings from dozens of species trained together, learning to work as teams rather than conquerors. The old military traditions based on domination were replaced by new doctrines emphasizing protection and service. 10 years after the Council's fall, the galaxy was unrecognizable. Trade flourished as never before. Scientific advancement accelerated as knowledge flowed freely. Art and culture bloomed as species rediscovered their own traditions while learning from others. The humans who had started the rebellion found themselves in an unexpected position. Other species looked to them for leadership, but the Terran Republic consistently refused to become the new galactic hegemon. They had not fought to replace the Council, but to end the era of single-species dominance forever. Admiral Morrison, now elderly but still sharp, gave his final speech at the 10th anniversary celebration. "We did not rebel because we wanted to rule the galaxy," he said. "We rebelled because we wanted the galaxy to be free. That dream has become reality, not just for humans but for everyone. The Galactic Council had pushed too hard, dismissed humanity's warnings, and mistaken patience for weakness. In the end, they learned what every bully eventually discovers. There always comes a day when someone refuses to back down. For humanity and their allies, that day had arrived and changed everything. The sound of humanity's patience snapping had echoed across the stars, and the galaxy was finally free.